Hello everyone, welcome to ExamRat. My name is Shatabdi, I'm a second year medical student. Today our topic of discussion is the human eye. Although most part of it is covered in biology, but it also has some significance in physics. So before we get into the physics part, let's just have a quick overview of the internal features of the eye. This will basically make us more understanding about how the refraction and reflection concepts of light are used in our own human eye. Okay, so let's start. We won't get into the very intricate details because that is not our scope. That portion will be done in biology. So all you have to know is that the innermost layer, like the eye has three layers: sclera, choroid, and retina. So the innermost layer is the retina. Okay. Basically, all you have to know is the retina is the portion where the light is ultimately concentrated, and the light does not fall on the entire retina. There is a certain spot known as the yellow spot where all the lights get converged and fall. So when I'm saying that the light rays coming from all across our field of vision are getting concentrated at one place, we mean that there is something that is converging all the light rays, right? Because our field of vision is huge, right? So obviously something is happening so that all the light rays from all around are converging at one single tiny point known as the yellow spot. Okay. So you can understand by this that something converging is placed here, as a result of which it is getting converged. Now, what is placed here? We have always known that our eyes have lens. So, since we have studied about refraction, we've studied about image formation by lenses, I hope you understand by now that which is the converging lens and which is the diverging lens. So, the converging lens is nothing but the biconvex lens that we had discussed about 2-3 sessions before. In case you've missed out on the lesson, you can easily just go to our YouTube channel and watch it. Okay, so this gives us an idea that biconvex lens is present in our eyes, as a result of which all the rays get converged and meet at one single point. That is the yellow spot of the retina. Okay, so this is basically the blue portion here is basically the lens. They have just written lens here, but it is basically a biconvex lens. Biconvex lens. Okay. So when you look at your own eye, obviously you cannot see the lens part, right? You see a white portion and then you see a black portion, like a very, very dark portion. It's not exactly black, but most people perceive it as black. And then there's a small whitish, like a very, very small hole, right? Okay. So first let's go talk about the dark portion. The dark portion is called iris. Okay. So if you can notice here that the pink portion here, like this is the iris. The iris is nothing but the extension of the choroid layer of the eye. So what I had earlier mentioned you is that there are three layers of eye: sclera, outermost, choroid, and then retina. So choroid is the second most layer, as you can understand, and the extension of the choroid layer is basically it basically forms the iris. Okay. So the iris basically does not like the whole choroidal layer is a circular layer, but it is unfinished or incomplete in the front, and this incomplete portion is the small aperture through which light basically enters our eye and then gets refracted along the lens. So you can understand that this whitish portion that I had drawn is the small aperture through which the light enters, and this is known as the pupil. Okay, so the iris forms a aperture in front of the lens known as the pupil, and you can very well understand that by now that the iris is basically responsible for the amount of light entering the eye, right? So if two iris come close to each other, then obviously the aperture will be smaller, and if they move away from each other, the aperture will be larger, right? Okay. So by this we can understand that iris controls the amount of light entering the eye. And how does iris control? It basically has some muscles. One which dilates the pupil, means increases the size of the pupil, and one which constricts the pupil or decreases the aperture of the pupil. Okay. So the name of the muscles are not important. You just have to know that what is the role of the iris, that it regulates the amount of light entering the eye. Okay. So the light directly does not fall on the iris. So first we said that the light directly does not fall on the lens. It also does not directly fall on the pupil. There is something in front of the iris. So like our eye or our lens is very well protected by a lot of layers. Okay. So the outermost layer, which is like the transparent layer, it is basically known as the conjunctival layer. You've often heard about the disease called conjunctivitis. It is where the conjunctiva becomes inflamed and becomes reddish in color. So the conjunctival layer is the outermost layer. Just behind this is basically the cornea, where the light actually gets reflected and enters the pupil, and then you have the lens, and then you have the aqueous humor, then you have the vitreous humor, and then you have the retina. Okay, so obviously the light directly after coming from the cornea, it travels this liquid portion. This is known as the aqueous humor. It is nothing but a medium in which the light can basically decrease its speed a little. You know that light speed is the most in gases, then liquids, then solids, right? So coming directly from gas, if we provide like a buffer or a liquid medium here, then the rays will bend a little because its speed will decrease. So it will be easier for the light rays to enter the small portion that is the pupil, right? So light coming from here, even though this ray diagram is given very perfectly, but this does not happen in reality. Light slowly starts getting refracted little by little, and when it has reached the biconvex lens, it again converges and then finally focuses itself on the yellow spot. Okay. Also, another thing is that since you know that there's a difference between real image and virtual image, and real image can be actually taken down on something, and virtual image is something that you see out of a mirror. So in this case, the image that is formed is real and inverted, but we see everything obviously erect. So what happens is that the inverted image, the stimulus from here will go back to the brain, and the brain will interpret it, and the brain will reverse it, and we will see the erect image. So when the light ray falls, actually it will show the same properties as that it used to show when image used to be formed out of biconvex lens, is that it used to always be inverted in nature. Okay. So we have almost covered all the important parts of the eye. Let's just go over the theory ones. The human eye is like a camera, obviously. Its lens system forms an image on a light-sensitive screen called retina, more specifically the yellow spot. Light enters the eye through a thin membrane called cornea. It forms this transparent bulge on the front of the surface of the eyeball, which I said, that the cornea, and above it you can find the conjunctiva. Anyway, the eyeball is approximately spherical in shape with a diameter of 2.3 centimeter. Most of the refraction of the light rays entering the eye occurs at the outer surface of the cornea. So before it even reaches the aqueous humor, the cornea somehow does all the refraction, and it means that it kind of starts converging the light rays. The crystalline lens merely provides the finer adjustment of focal length required to focus objects at different distances on the retina. So the lens's job is not only to converge the light, because most of the converging is done by the cornea. What has to be done by the lens is that it basically has to focus on the object, whether the object is 50 meters away from you or 5 meters away from you, accordingly adjusting your eye to be able to see both. That job is done by the lens. Okay. So before going into that, let us just deal with the properties again. We talked about iris, how it is a dark muscular diaphragm that controls the size of the pupil. The pupil regulates and controls the amount of light entering the eye. And the eye lens forms an inverted real image, as I told you. The retina is a delicate membrane having enormous number of light sensitive cells, and these sensitive cells basically get activated upon illumination. They get stimulated rather and generate electrical signals. These signals are sent to the brain via the optic nerves. These nerves here. The brain then interprets these signals and finally processes the information so that we perceive the object as it is. Okay. So simple. Okay. So now we know that iris had some muscle that used to constrict or dilate the pupil accordingly to regulate the amount of light entering the eye. In the same way, the lens also has certain muscles attached with it. The red portion here are the muscles, and the black portion here are the ligaments coming out of the muscles. They are attached to the lens and they accordingly contract and relax to make the focal length of the lens shorter or longer. Okay. So making the lens shorter or longer to accordingly adjust our eye for objects is basically, in a few words, known as the power of accommodation. Okay, so like accommodation, you know, is another term used for adjustment or to accommodate. So in the same way, the lens also does so when we have to view something nearer or farther to us. So the lens is made of a fibrous jelly-like material. Its curvature can be modified to some extent by ciliary muscles. The change in the curvature of the eye lens can thus change its focal length. Okay, so lens, suspensory ligaments, and ciliary muscles. Okay, so what they are saying is that when the muscles are relaxed, the lens becomes thin. So basically what they are saying is that when the muscles are relaxed, this is the ciliary muscles, don't forget, but the red portion is the suspensory ligaments. Suspensory means something that is suspending something from the other. So here the suspensory ligaments are suspending the lens from the ciliary muscle. So this is the suspensory ligaments. So basically what is happening is that when the ciliary muscles are being relaxed, the suspensory ligaments are being contracted. They are becoming tight. When they are becoming tight, really tight they are becoming, so they are basically making the lens very thin. Okay, so now what is the advantage? When you are making a lens thin, you are basically increasing its focal length. This is enabling us to see distant objects. So relaxing of the ciliary muscle will lead to contraction of the suspensory ligaments, as a result of which the lens will become thin. Focal length will increase, for which we will be able to see distant objects. Okay. So, this was for distant objects. Now, when we are looking at objects closer to the eye, you can very well understand that the opposite is going to happen. So, what is going to happen here? Here, the ciliary muscles will undergo contraction, as a result of which the suspensory ligaments will go relaxation. Okay, so now they are relaxed, and the ciliary muscles in turn have become tight. So as a result of which the lens will bulge out. The ciliary muscles contract, it increases the curvature of the lens becomes thicker, consequently the focal length of the eye lens decreases. So lens becomes thick, right? Focal length decreases, we can view nearby objects. So if you just take a moment and pause the video and take down the flowchart, next time it will be easier for you to immediately remember what happens according to the distant object viewing or near object viewing, so you can answer them easily. Okay. So the technical definition is the ability of the eye lens to adjust its focal length is called accommodation. However, the focal length of the eye lens cannot be decreased below a certain limit. Yeah. So you can understand that there is obviously a limit to the eye. So after a point, even if you place your textbook very, very close to you, you will not be able to read. It will become hazy. And then at the same time, when you take something very, very, very far, you'll obviously not be able to view it anymore. It goes out of your field of vision, means that your lens has a certain capacity. Okay. The minimum distance at which objects can be seen most distinctly without strain is called the least distance of distinct vision, the minimum distance from your eye. That is basically 25 centimeter. So if this is your eye, from the lateral view I'm saying, this is 25 centimeter. If you place something here, your eye, this is less than 25 centimeter, this is 25 centimeters. So if you place something here or anywhere between this and this, the eye won't be able to focus on it. It won't be able to see it. For young adult, it is 25 centimeter. The farthest point up to which an eye can see object clearly is infinity. But obviously it has to come into our field of vision. If it is out of our field of vision, we won't be able to see it anymore. Okay. So since we are talking about lens, we should also discuss some diseases, some problems that can occur. We know that the lens, the prerequisite of a lens, that it has to be crystalline, like it has to be transparent almost, so that the light can properly converge, right? Sometimes what happens is that certain substances, they accumulate here, which makes the crystalline, the lens is not crystalline anymore, it's not crystal-like anymore, it is milky and cloudy. So obviously the refraction will not happen properly, the light won't pass through the lens with the same intensity, as a result of which it will be like a blurry vision, and this condition is known as cataract. This causes partial or complete loss of vision. It is possible to restore vision through a cataract surgery. Just this accumulated substance is basically taken out. Okay. Now we come to some defects of vision. There are mainly 3 refractive defects. One is myopia or nearsightedness, another is hypermetropia or farsightedness, and the third one is presbyopia. Okay. So first let's talk about what is myopia. Myopia is basically nearsightedness, which means that the person is able to see the objects close to it, but when you move it farther, more than 25 centimeter away, it starts becoming blurred, and after some time you cannot see anything clearly. So 25 centimeters is more or less the limit. A person with myopia can see nearby objects clearly but cannot see distant objects distinctly. Everything becomes blurry. A person with this defect has the far point nearer than infinity. Obviously, such a person can see clearly up to a few meters. In a myopic eye, the image of distant object is formed in front of the retina and not at the retina itself. So what it is saying is that 25 centimeters is basically constant for all types of eye. But now when you make the object go farther and farther away from you, it will become hazy, and after a point you cannot see that object distinctly anymore. It will become a blur. So what is happening basically in this defect is that you can see here that the object which was supposed to be, the image which was supposed to be formed at the yellow spot at the retina, the image is forming before the retina, right? There's a very distinct gap, if you can notice here. It is forming in front of the retina. So what do we have to do in this case? Common sense says that if we put a lens here which sort of diverges the rays. So which type of lens here we'll talk about it later, but if you put a diverging lens, so what is basically happening? The light rays coming will diverge a little, right? Like it will obviously take some more time. Then when it gets refracted through the lens, it will be able to exactly concentrate at the retina. So you're understanding, right, that what is the importance of the diverging lens here is that we first diverge the light rays so that the light travels a little bit more distance and bridges this gap that was formed between the retina and the initial image. So diverging lens we know is the concave lens. So concave lens of suitable power will bring the image back onto the retina, and thus the defect is corrected. Okay. Hypermetropia is exactly the opposite. It is known as farsightedness. A person with hypermetropia can see distant objects clearly but not nearby objects. So the near point is farther away from the normal near point, obviously. Such a person has to keep a reading material much beyond 25 centimeter for comfortable reading. It has to, like if this is the eye and this is 25 centimeter, then the person has to keep the object here to be able to see it clearly. And that is not always comfortable because the head starts paining also. So here we need an opposite lens, that is we need something that converges the light, because here the image, if you can notice, is formed beyond the retina. So we have to do something so that the image is formed before when it was supposed to form. Let's see. Here it is formed at the retina. Here it is in the second case. Here it is formed beyond the retina. Like the retina was here, the object is formed here. So for correction, basically we have to put a converging lens which converges the rays, and it soon gets concentrated at the retina. So the reason for this defect is that sometimes the focal length of the eye becomes too long or the eye has become too small. So in either of the cases, if eye has become too small for some reason, you know that obviously the distance that the light was supposed to travel, it is traveling the same distance, but the size of the eye has decreased, so obviously the retina comes in front. So it is corrected by a convex lens. Okay. Presbyopia. It is basically it is a problem of the lens, that the lens sort of loses its ability to focus. Like technically it is a problem of the ciliary muscles and the suspensory ligaments attached to it. So since they have a little bit of malfunction, as a result of which they are not able to focus the lens accordingly, that means that the power, it means that the power of the lens to accommodate has decreased. So then what we have to do is, basically, we have to find a certain kind of a lens which will help us in helping the helping our lens to focus better, right? So we usually use cylindrical lenses. Okay. So sometimes what happens is that a person has both myopia and hypermetropia, which usually happens at old age. So in that case, they require a bifocal lens. It has both a concave and a convex lens. The upper portion is usually the concave portion, excuse me, and the lower portion is convex, so that when the eye is looked at by the lower portion, it can read the books and everything, and this portion is used to view the farther objects. Also nowadays, we, instead of using glasses, also since technology is advanced, we use lenses which directly are put in front of our eye, so we don't have to use spectacles anymore. We use it by proper lenses which are fit into our eye, and it carries out the same function. Also, sometimes lenses are put surgically on the eye, like they're surgically connected to the cornea of the eye. So we don't have to physically also put the lenses in our eye, they are fixed. Okay. So this brings us to the end of this portion of discussion, which was mostly dealt about human eye, how reflection takes place there, how the lens is a very important part of our eye, how it helps us focus on near objects, far objects, and the defects of the eye. Okay. So in our next class, we'll be starting with our new chapter about current. So that will be all for today. Thank you for watching.